So now we will take it away with Deborah Rosati from Women Get On Board.
Thank you, Keisha. I guess I'll do the tech tips, or you've done them. Can you go to that slide just in case? Okay, just as a reminder, welcome everyone. Please make sure your camera's off, your mute's on. This session will be recorded. Recording will be shared in a follow-up communication, and please use the chat function at any time to ask a question. The moderator will direct to the panelists during the Q&A period. So welcome all, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. And thank you, Keisha, for being our technical producer for our session today. I'm Deborah Rosati, founder and CEO of Women Get On Board. Women Get On Board is a member-based company that connects, promotes, and empowers women to corporate boards. We've got over 600 members across Canada, and it continues to grow. And we are delighted to be hosting this virtual session with our national strategic partner, KPMG, on a topic that's a very trending topic, shall we say, the innovation agenda and governing with a digital mindset. And we've got a panel of experts and a moderator that has deep domain expertise. So very excited to explore and have conversations around how you bring a digital mindset into the boardroom. But before we begin, I want to let everyone know that at the end of this session, you will get a thank you with a survey. We really appreciate your feedback. And a few days later, you will receive a copy of the recording. And then sometime in early April, we'll post out, we'll have a blog for this particular event. So thank you all. So before we begin also, I'd like to thank the KPMG team and the Women Get On Board team for supporting all the efforts, the behind the scenes, because without them, we wouldn't be having a well-attended event today. So let's begin. I'd like to now introduce our esteemed moderator, Armagan Ahmad. He is the president and managing partner of digital at KPMG. He leads the firm's digital transformation solutions go-to-market serving large enterprise, commercial, and public sectors clients. KPMG is bridging the consulting services with mainstream and exponential technologies to deliver business function level customer experiences. And before joining KPMG, Armagan, he served as Senior Vice President, General Manager at Dell Technologies, where he led the company's global cloud solutions and alliance organizations with a team of engineering, sales, marketing, customer success organizations across North America, European, and Asian markets. Before Dell Tech, he had held senior executive positions at HP and Huawei, 3Com, and technology firms. Armagan serves on the advisory board of Future Skills Center, Queen's University AI and Analytics Board, and the Dean's Advisory Council for the University of Waterloo. He is a passionate promoter of girls' STEAM, education, mental health awareness, and homelessness resettlement programs. Without further ado, over to you, Armagan. Thank you.
Deborah, thank you so much for that. Such a kind introduction. It's been so long since I've had anyone virtually read out the whole bio, so thank you for embarrassing me a little bit there. So, I am so excited to be hosting such an esteemed panel, and thank you for Women Get On Board for inviting us at KPMG and partnering with us. I'd like to introduce the panelists that are going to be joining me today. Catherine Emberley, she's a dear friend. She's also president of business at Shaw Communications. She's held numerous leadership roles in her 17 years with the organization. Currently, she serves as a director of the board of Calgary Economic Development. I know she's a Calgarian, so nice to see you again, Catherine.
Hello.
Thank you. Next, we have Jane Skoblo. Jane is currently on the board of the new Digital Research Infrastructure Organization. It's called the NDRIO. And then also she's serving on the board of Points, a technology company working in the loyalty and e-commerce industry, as well as she's on the board of Allstate. Previously, Vice President for Digital Operations, Rogers Communications, and VP and CFO for Global Rewards at Amex and Amex Bank of Canada. Nice to see you, Jane. And then we have finally the third panelist. We have Pamela Steer. Pamela is currently the board member of City of Toronto Investment Board, former CFO and Chief Strategy Officer at Payment Canada, and previously also the CFO at WSIB. So Pamela, welcome.
Thank you.
Great. So I know, in addition to your day-to-day jobs, I didn't embarrass you like I just got embarrassed by Deborah reading the whole profile. I know all three of you, getting to know you in preparation for this, are so well esteemed and well established in your own careers and your day-to-day lives, which you serve. But I thought it would be nice, as in your day-to-day jobs, as you continue to execute towards that. I know all of you are contributing to not-for-profit boards as well as various different hospitals and sustainable finance and ESG and helping people and persons with disabilities. It's just, to name a few, I know there's a lot of good work you do. I think a lot of us talked about this in prepping for this panel where, providing good purpose-led leadership is so important during the time of extreme challenge that all of us have been going through. So I thought before we get into the real meat of our conversation around innovation and digital and what does that mean for board members on governing, because that's also changing very, very fast. I thought we'll get to know you a little bit and get the audience to get to know you. Are you all game for that? Just ask some quick questions, and the first thing that comes to your mind. So Catherine, I'm going to go with you first. So what show you are binge watching on Netflix or Prime or Disney Plus or whichever new one, Paramount Plus, I think, just kidding.
So many choices.
Which one's your favorite?
Feels like I'm on Oprah. Right now I'm obsessed with Stanley Tucci's Italy, and it's actually on CNN. And right before COVID, I was supposed to go to Italy, so it's me pretending that I'm going to Italy.
That's so cool. I think there's only one show that's actually taken me away to something that we used to do before. So I think Stanley Tucci is doing a great job. Okay, Jane, if you had your own talk show, speaking of Oprah, I guess, who would be your first guest on your talk show?
I would say Michelle Obama. I absolutely admire her poise and resilience. And so I would love to have a conversation with her.
Awesome. And Pamela, if you could instantly become an expert on something, you get micro-credentialed like this, what would it be?
I think a pilot.
A pilot? Yeah. Clearly airlines are not flying anywhere, so you might as well fly yourself somewhere. So it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Catherine, we'll come to you for the last one. So if you had an extra hour of free time each day, which is very, very hard to find these days, how would you use it?
I think I would exercise to get rid of the COVID drinking now.
We're all with you.
Yeah.
I'm totally with you on that. Jane, what is one thing in your life that has changed since the pandemic and that you will keep when it's over?
I don't know if it's changed, but I think the appreciation for the importance of family and friends, I think it's just been elevated. And I think that's one thing that I would not want to lose after the pandemic, that connection that we have, that circle that we've created. So to me, that's something that was really brought forward by the pandemic.
That's a good one. I just heard the CEO of Microsoft say something like, we work at home and we sleep at work now. So, it's how do you create that harmony? It's such an important one. So Pamela, we'll end with you. So, I think binging Netflix is one thing. I think everyone's gotten into podcasts. So what are you listening to these days?
So I have to confess, because I'm not commuting anymore, except from up the stairs, down the stairs, I'm not listening to podcasts. I'm going to go back to the Netflix and say that I'm listening to and watching Call My Agent, because I'm actually, while I'm off, I'm improving my French. So I'm watching Call My Agent in French with French subtitles, and that has been absolutely fantastic.
Wonderful. It's such an important topic that we're about to get into, and I thought it would be just good for people to know the human side of these amazing panelists that we have. By the way, I do have a podcast. It's called Pivot. It's by Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. And on my walks every day, I'm religious about shedding my pounds every day. So I try to get one down every day. They're so funny and so geopolitical, ESG/tech oriented. Okay, so why don't I quickly just preface what we're going to talk about, and then I'll start asking you guys the questions because you're the experts really on this. So I know, having served at a lot of global Fortune 500 companies, and you've also worked at some of these, top Fortune companies in the world. I think it's important to sort of understand that digital success is now starting at the boardroom. I think boardroom is changing. Just take a look at our esteemed panelists who are board members. They're not your traditional 65 to 75-year-old. I think that's changing because you really do have to think about the digital success starting at the boardroom and how you actually govern by ensuring that innovation is moving forward at the speed of thought by the CEO and the executive team, and creating growth opportunities and ensuring that their risk profiles are set up to ensure that they are wanting to not just get disrupted, they want to be the disruptor of organizations. And I think everyone has now understood that exponential curves. I think before, all of us at Singularity University and others were talking about explaining to people what exponential curve was. I think COVID has made it very clear that there is this exponential curve that has happened in the retail industry or online industry or music industry. We've seen what those look like. But I think boards have a very important role to play to drive innovation. At KPMG, that's sort of what my role and my teams organize, and our teams on digital innovation is. Globally, we focus on helping our clients take advantage and mitigate risks. If you just look at Apple, for example, right, just a constant product renewal, that we're all signing up for a new iPhone or an iPad, and the culture of fail fast that needs to be supported by the board requires a growth mindset. And that's what Tim Cook does, ensures that the board members and the chairman of the boards are thinking of new products and services. Apple had to find their second 2.0 wind as a life. Microsoft just found their wind as a life. I think there's lots of retail organizations, telco organizations who are pivoting. We just had this big, massive announcement between Rogers and Shaw. So we're definitely going to put Catherine on a hot seat. And maybe let's see if she's able to share anything with us, maybe high level. But I think it's important that that's going to change. And I think boards need to be aware of the risks. A good example is SolarWinds, which we all saw a huge threat that sort of took place at a technology company that sort of creates an impact on all organizations that are using the SolarWinds. And I think out of the Fortune 500, something like 450, the Fortune 500s were using it. And were the boards aware of the risks of cybersecurity is a big question. So I think that's a big question for us to tackle. And then finally, I think technology is evolving in a cycle of months rather than years. And it's no longer just living quarter by quarter or having board members think strategically 3 years out, 4 years out. It is about how do you keep pace with the digital disruption. And I also, by the way, say that this conversation is not about technology today. It's not about technology, is just the enabler. Humans are the real transformers, and the board's role to understand that transformation narrative, which is an end-to-end narrative, not just that, oh, have you done buzzword bingo today of cloud, AI, machine learning, blockchain, but it's really about that transformation that everyone needs to go drive towards. So I thought with those preface comments, we'll maybe get into the very first topic, which is around innovation as a strategic imperative. And how are the board organizations that all three of you serve on, you feel that boards need to work for thinking about innovation, and how has this been addressed at the board level so far, from your opinion? So maybe Catherine, I'll start with you on, does innovation require some sort of a long-term thinking? And I guess maybe let's just start with what is all three of your opinions on the role of the board for digital. So I'll start with you, Catherine.
Yeah, I think the role of the board is big. And I think what's happening is we've all seen the pace of change is so fast, and there are so many shiny things and buzzwords everywhere. It's very easy for everyone in the organization and the board to get distracted and not see what it is we're aiming for. So I think focus is a huge area, really understanding what's the business case, how are we going to monetize? And it's tough because some of the business cases of the far out are very hard to see right now. And so when's the right time to invest? So, we've really been thinking about how do you actually look at all of your core systems in business. And we focused on lowering your cost to serve so that as new technology and over the top and cloud comes in, you're able to actually get it to market quickly. So those foundational pieces. So it's about, I think, for the board, having a big long-term vision, but making sure you're really guiding on small, achievable steps along the way and keeping everyone focused.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Jane, do you want to tackle the same question first?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, Catherine is absolutely right. I think there's also, it isn't one size fits all, approach when it comes to innovation at the board level. When you're talking about sort of high growth companies, boards often view their role as guiding innovation, and they're typically seek to enforce more accountability and discipline in a highly entrepreneurial company without slowing down the innovation. And I'm dealing with a number of companies that are coming to me and saying, look, we want to raise equity, or we plan to do an IPO at some point later down the road. We understand we need board, we understand we need governance, but how do we do it without slowing down the innovation? And if you're talking about a more established companies, sometimes board are looking to actually encourage greater innovation, but it isn't the board's job to drive innovation. It is the job of the management once the board has given the CEO that mandate. And the role of the board is really to facilitate innovation. And you do it by hiring the right CEO, including innovation, as Catherine pointed out, in the company strategy, creative, the corporate culture where, that fosters innovation, ensuring that the board is composed of people who can provide advice, ask the right questions, understand the impacts and risks, and developing even the culture within the boardroom that is consistent with innovation. It's about striking a healthy tension between governance and innovation.
Yeah, and then maybe, I'll just come to you, Pamela, and maybe you can also round us out on what you're seeing, the board's role when it comes to innovation and digital.
I think Catherine and Jane have really started off the conversation in the right place, and I'm going to talk about two aspects just basically, and I think, Jane, you covered it well. It's the distinction between what goes on in the boardroom and leaving the executive role behind, because many of us who are now aspiring or coming on to boards, we want to dig in and we want to execute. Well, that's not our job. So what is the proper involvement of a board member to do proper governance and oversight and strategic shaping and asking of questions versus getting in and knowing the better path or wanting to do it like so many of us as driven executives would like to have that bent. So I think that balance is really important, and understanding where the CEO, once they have the mandate, is where they are going, and making sure there's trust, communications, and confidence. And at what point, if things go sideways, is the board's job to bring it back to that central path. The second aspect that I'd like to just raise, and I think Catherine and Jane, you're absolutely right with respect to innovation and moving forward. However, many of the organizations with which I've been involved in the past have to overcome a massive technical deficit before they can look ahead, or while they're also looking ahead to innovate. And that technical deficit is really hard to overcome, hard often for boards and even management to understand, quantify, and then to make a business case about something that has no monetization value. It's actually explaining that you're overcoming a massive deficit that's been created over years or maybe even decades that has exposed weaknesses and gaps in cybersecurity in particular, and vulnerabilities that need to be addressed, as well as then the forward moving innovation agenda. It's not the fun stuff to look behind and fix the mess that usually has been created over decades. However, it has to be part of the solution in order to go forward. So those are the two aspects there.
Such a good point. And maybe let's take that 10,000 foot view of the board roll down to now the next, let's double click it once, right? So, Catherine, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about, innovation at the board level requires long-term thinking. If innovation was set up at Blockbuster or Kodak, it wouldn't have happened. I think there's a lot of existing companies that are struggling with this, which is everyone keeps saying, oh yeah, we're innovating. Trust me, board of directors, we're good. We'll pivot fast enough. What is the board's role in, helping balance long-term thinking as well as the investment strategies on how they maybe create, these adjacent organizations off to the side so that they're taking, 20% or 10% of their money, time, skills, EBITDA, offshoots that are focused on running an adjacent disruptive innovation body while there's a core that's running the day-to-day. So, how does a board balance that short-term versus the long-term thinking?
Yeah, I would probably disagree with you on the to the side right from the beginning. I don't believe there's any industry now where every single person needs to be innovative and thinking differently. So I really believe that you should have that integrated into your business, and everybody should be looking at their business model. Everyone needs to have that mindset. So I do think you've got to have some trust on with the executive team, because they do need to take some risks. People have to, I call it, eat your own lunch in some cases, where you're replacing legacy revenue with new revenue, and that doesn't always happen overnight. And so some trust on that. But I love dashboards and metrics, and so I think all of it needs to be measured, and that's what the board should be looking at. It's are we where we thought we would be? If yes or no, here's why. And giving all of that data and information back to show that you're on track. But I believe innovation needs to be in every single part of an organization.
So I love panels where we actually disagree with each other. So it actually makes it much more fun for the audience that are listening to it. So I think it would be so great if we continue to disagree, because it makes so much more exciting. Just to talk about that disagreement, because I think it's important to realize, there have been very large retailers and banks who tried to do things in their core and setting up these dashboards and metrics, but the culture didn't move fast enough because you were measuring someone on revenue and margin in different ways, but they weren't able to pivot because they were like, what do you want? Do you want me to give you an EPS every 3 months, or do you want me to build a product that may take 6 months? So maybe, Jane, I'll bring the next one to you, which is, how have you seen organizations create separate entities to drive innovation, to disrupt business models, because their existing ones is trying to make a 3-month shot clock work, and then there's this organization's trying to say, hey, do it in both ways. So how does board measure the success of that activity versus the core business?
Yeah, so I hate to disagree with Catherine.
I love it. That's great.
This is, I think, just seeing the variety, I think, of ways in which different companies do tackle this innovation issue. Within reason, I think anyone can disrupt. But I think, only a select few have the ability to embed a digital approach into the business and then transform it into the long-term cultural change. Because it is about, as you pointed out in the beginning, it is about more than just digital. It is about more than just technology. It is fundamentally changing the culture and how company is operating. And so depending on the maturity of the organization and its system, as Pamela pointed out, I've seen companies that do set up a separate entity that adopts disruptive technologies, and agile development and quick product releases, as well as in companies that are trying to kind of embed this innovation into its existing business and operating model with various degrees of success. I think for boards, the issue of innovation, especially innovation governance, is critical. Because as companies are investing more in exploring these new technologies, the investments could be a considerable cost to the company, and you're starting to starve some businesses to feed that innovation. And just the cost can very quickly escalate as companies trying to find a valid use case for any new technology. So from a board, I would say that there's sort of 2 dimensions to innovation governance. One is the oversight of the innovation process. So how do you start from idea pipeline to curation of the ideas, and then to prioritizing the ideas, in the right sequence and tying it to what you want to accomplish. And then the second really is oversight of the actual content of innovation, which is really the what and the how. So if you're trying to better the customer experience, show me what ideas do you have, what would work, and then how is it actually going to change customer experience? Because I think this is sort of where the gist of it comes from, is this changing this customer experience, which then results in increased revenues for for the company, decreased cost, lower risk, sustainability, survival. So I think there's two different approaches that I have seen, and they work with different levels of success.
So, this is perfect because not every industry, and I actually planted this question in a way that we would disagree, but it was not planned this way, but I planted it this way. Because, depending on the industry you're talking to, depending on the not just industry, but also, I would say the organization, there are times where you need to continue to drive that culture and you need to keep something adjacent and then make sure it has tentacles to the core. And there are times, like Catherine mentioned, that it has to be in the core and you're like, enough is enough, everyone has to go. And so I think there's a balance on the maturity stages, right? Versus some organizations are on this end, there are others on this end, and you should be able to, as board members, really understand where your organization and sub business groups within the organizations are, so that you're able to do that. So maybe we'll pivot to the second conversation, and we'll now triple click with Pamela. So, and that's under the heading of understanding digital transformation and the role of the board, right? So first we talked about the innovation as a strategic imperative to say, okay, yeah, we're going to innovate, we're going to come up with some cool stuff to do, we're going to be the disruptor versus the disrupted. But now it gets real, and you have to now understand the actual digital transformation and the role of the board there. So Pamela, how do you bring that technology aspect of digital transformation into your business? So the front office is sort of thinking about the new CRM. The middle office of supply chain is thinking of how do I create a modern supply chain that connects the front office to the back office of your traditional finance and legal and HR and IT roles. How do you connect those together? How does the board ensure that the executives are actually driving the digital transformation forward?
I think like any business, it depends. So it depends, I think, where Jane was going and Catherine with respect to some organizations, you do it on the side because it's too hard to change the culture within and you're chasing the quarterlies, or some it's integrated fully within. It depends on your business. For the board, I would say it generally starts with education. Don't forget, these people are likely only together for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, maybe 8 hours every 3 months. Maybe they get together 5, 6 times a year at the outside, but they forget. We're getting old, we forget. And so understanding the context within which this innovation is going to happen and what is the goal and the outcome that is desired. So is it better customer service? Oh dear, now my cat's going to make a cameo as she likes to for these things. Apologies.
It wouldn't be a panel without a cat.
I know. You can just hear her in the background there. So I think that it starts with education. What is the outcome that we desire? How are we going to achieve it? And the KISS principle for the board. Tell me what we're going to get out of this. Tell me how I know you're going to be successful. What are the metrics that we can put in place to determine whether A, this is the right path we're going down, then B, how do you prepare the teams to accept and want to take hold of this change? What is it going to do for us? How long is it going to take? And then how much is it going to cost in terms of both wear and tear on the organization, actual dollars, people involvement, consultants, and so forth. So it can get very quickly to a many-headed hydra. For me, as a board member, rather than as an executive, I want to keep it simple. I want to understand what is the outcome. If I start to hear all sorts of fuzzy stuff around the edges, I'm going to start asking some pretty direct questions about, okay, is that actually required? You can see the scope creeping, and that's a big issue that boards grapple with. How do we narrow it down? So I realize I'm starting to go off into a tangent. I think it's getting down to the basics. It's making sure that the executive can explain it to me in terms that I will A, remember, and B, quickly understand from a business perspective before we do these deep dives into the actual technology. Because at the end of the day, most of our businesses are very people-centered, people-centric, and we are going to have to be the ones evangelizing this change and describing and discussing and promoting why it's the right thing for the organization to do. And so for me, the board needs to be at the top of that. It needs to be simple, crisp, and understandable. And then we need to apply the metrics and all the discipline around it to hold executives' feet to the fire.
Yeah, it's really, really well said, Pamela. And maybe we have quite a few folks listening to us, and let me just take a pause and make sure that I remind everybody that they should be posting any questions you have, because just in about 15 minutes time, I'll start taking your questions and asking our esteemed panelists. So please do start sending your questions, in the Q&A or the chat function, and I would appreciate that very much. And I know our panelists would appreciate it very much.
Can I just add one other comment to Pamela, because I think it's absolutely critical, to Pamela, as Pamela said, the education. But I think the other piece that I think is, besides the strategy, the other role that the board plays is oversight of risk. And I think the boards are good at managing traditional risk, the financial risk, the operational risk. But traditional risk infrastructure has not necessarily kept pace with the innovation and with the new risks that the digital transformation has brought. And so now the boards are looking and overseeing these new emerging domains. We talked about technology governance, cyber, agile development, cloud implementation, blockchain, the innovation governance that we talked about, and data governance. The privacy, the use of artificial intelligence, and bias potentially in artificial intelligence. So there's these areas of, new areas that the board has to educate itself, in addition to understanding the technology and the context of it, that is new for the boards.
Yeah, it's such an important point, Jane, right? Which is the context of technology and how you balance that technology as part of the role for the board, but not getting too much into the weeds, but do think about the transformation that's happening across the front and the middle and the back office at different points, but keeping it connected. Because I think if the board is not thinking about the connection points, a lot of times the executives, I think we've all served in boards to know that there is a show and tell that happens when the CEO comes in and says, let me bring my chief marketing officer this time around and wow you with the CRM. But your job is not to get wowed only by the CRM aspect. Your job is to then think about, okay, great, fantastic. Now tell me how you are connecting that CRM to your supply chain, to your HR, to your finance systems, and how does that entire connection point work? So maybe this would be a good pivot to my favorite topic of our conversation so far, which I think it's all of yours as well. It's around culture. So you could do amazing innovation off to the side or in the middle or adjacent. You can then go and spend a lot of money. And by the way, there's IDC surveys and KPMG surveys that show you that if you go and talk to a Fortune 500 CEO and say, show me a line graph on how much you've spent on technology over the last 10 years, they usually show you something like this. It's like a rocket ship that's going almost straight, billions of dollars. And then you ask the next question, tell me which part of your businesses are now digitally transformed and you're now offering a service in a very different way. And that graph looks something like this, like it's almost like a 5% increase. So there's a difference between technology, buying technology, deploying technology, and actually transforming. And it's related to culture, because innovation requires this agility and the freedom to try, fail, iterate quickly, and a culture that supports what I say a lot is psychological safety, at the CEO level as well as down to the executive staff. It does need to provide psychological safety for fail fast mentality. And innovation also requires a longer term investment that doesn't say, hey, it's not working 3 months later or 6 months later. The white blood cells come out and sort of tell you, hey, I think Walmart killed the Amazon idea 6 different times. So I think that's changing in terms of how people think. And maybe Catherine, I know you and I've geeked out on culture for such a long time. How have boards and boards you've served on addressed the cultural aspect of innovation and the high rate of failure that it comes with, and then bringing people along for the ride to say, this is how we're going to change our business, and this can create an environment of significant conflict between existing business units and these new shiny objects, which usually the existing business units are paying for. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think that's why I'm so passionate about innovation and technology transformation being embedded in the whole organization, because I think if it's done by an outside group and then they deliver it to the organization, that's when you get that, ew, not my thing, I don't want to touch that sort of feeling. Whereas if we build it together, you just get more adoption. And so what we really focused on was every person, within the entire organization at every single level, being engaged in some way to transform. And so the permission, from the board in order to begin to drive the culture in that direction was really critical. I mean, the way we really started was pretty radical at Shaw. And so, a number of years ago, we did a program, a voluntary departure program. We decreased the human size of our organization by 25%. And then we had 24 months to complete our digital transformation because we had to automate so many roles. And so all of a sudden it became critical that we get these projects done. They were at the top of the list. We reported to the board on each of the projects, where they were at and what progress we were making. And it really, we all had this goal collectively in sight of how do we become more efficient as an organization so we can continue to thrive. And it got really fun because we had your big enterprise wide projects, but then we also empower people within your individual role. I always say to people, you can see it better than I can see it. You know what you're doing every day. So how can we collectively make that more efficient? And so there might be like robotic process automation that we're doing at some frontline roles that really was built by the frontline roles. So this whole culture of change and innovation and technology transformation, I think, was really interesting. It wasn't easy and it didn't happen overnight, but you certainly need your board supportive of that. We've always been a culture company, and so we talk about culture at the board and everything that we're doing, from communication to engagement, et cetera. So it's a topic that is as important as the technology transformation. And I firmly believe the most important thing in transformation is the people. The technology, there's all kinds of technologies you can choose, but getting the people to buy in and participate is critical.
As you were talking, Catherine, there's a question that's come up, and I think it's really relevant. So I would love for either Jane or Pamela or anyone to tackle. It says, it's a question from the audience that says, are board members held accountable for situations where innovation does not succeed and potentially leads the company into jeopardy? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I think I haven't seen yet where a board member is being held accountable. I think as a board, as we talked about, and as Catherine pointed out, sort of, you set the tone at the top, right? So if the board is not willing to entertain the culture of innovation, if the board is not willing to make investments in some of these, strategic digital transformations, and accept, that there could be failures without then sort of casting blame, then the company, is not going to succeed. And so the board is pivotal when it comes to giving the CEO the permission and mandate to pursue opportunities to introduce risk into the culture, as Catherine pointed out. I think the board's role sort of, as I mentioned again, as an overseer of risk, the board should focus on taking risk on initiative that will create this, shareholder value in the long term. And then kind of, and help management gauge which opportunities to pursue and which, safeguards to employ. And then as a monitor of performance, the board should set expectations regarding measures such as, number of initiatives. We've been in places where it could be a list of 100 initiatives. Well, again, you don't have the money, you don't have the resources, and you lack the focus. You need to really go with only a few. So helping management to kind of narrow that list. The board should establish the measures of success and failures. It's very different from traditional measures in the digital transformation. It should figure out the acceptable range of return, because again, before, the ROI that we use, for example, to apply to investments may no longer work. It may now be focused on a customer churn or customer NPS scores. It's completely different measures. And I think most important, I think the board should have the discipline to call an end to an initiative where they see that it's not succeeding, no matter how married, the board or the management is to it. Like, it takes guts to say, we've gone down the path, there's no need to throw, good money after bad, and we need to end this. That's really, I think, what the board role is. And I think, board as a whole, if it's a public company, will be measured on its performance by the shareholders. I mean, that's really, how it's going to come out. Shareholders will either vote the board out if they see that it's not succeeding, or they will keep the board. So I think, to me, that's how I look at it.
So now, as you're speaking, Jane, there are more follow-up questions coming up. So this is great. This is perfect virtual engagement of 100 plus people that are on, and a lot of board members. So I think they're asking some amazing questions. So next question from the audience is, and I'm sorry, I'm sort of going off script because I think these questions are so good. This question says, it's related to board composition. It says, what is the prevalence of committees or special task forces focused on digital or technology, and how do you, or to what extent do you need to ensure your board composition includes the strength in digital transformation? So basically, essentially what they're saying is, do you want a bunch of traditional board members who come from audit committee type chairs and that governance from risk, or HR or exec compensation oversight, or do you now want to start thinking about diversifying your board members?
So I'll start, if that's okay, if I may, and say what I have seen in my last 2 organizations for my day job is that in initial stages, certainly the board created a task force focused on the innovation and peopled it with non-board members who had the expertise that they all lacked and voluntarily admitted that they lacked, with board participation and management presentation. And in another case, it was a full committee of board members, and they recruited specifically those who had the talents that were needed. What I'm seeing now in evolving is, in one of those cases, the technology committee dissolved, and some of those members were absorbed and became fully fledged board members because they had the skills and experiences. And the initiative was so strategic and so central to the mandate of the organization that the technology committee was dissolved, and it simply became part of the full board's mandate, rather than delegating to any one committee, because all of the board members recognized that they all had a role in the transformation. And it wasn't just about digital and having the technological skills, though those were acquired along the way. It was, hey, we need somebody that's got financial knowledge. We need somebody that really understands the operations of the business and what it'll look like. We need somebody with that risk knowledge and lens. We need a legal mind. So it took the totality of the board to provide appropriate governance and oversight. So I'm seeing, certainly in a couple of recent examples, an evolution and approach, a new approach emerging for board recruitment, as well as the board's stance on large transformation.
Anything, Catherine or Jane, you want to add to it, or should I move to my next question?
Well, I would just add that, when you see a Gartner study that says that by 2025, 40% of boards will have a dedicated cybersecurity committee. overseen by qualified board members. And right now, I think we're less than 10% today. Like, you can see the shift in the board composition and the skills coming. And I've seen it certainly in the last 18 months. There is a lot more emphasis when the boards do search. The emphasis is on that, digital skill set, right? And it's not just like, a digital thinker who, somebody who kind of conceptually understands the environment, or somebody, who kind of like dabbles in digital. It is truly someone, like a digital transformer who has led or participated in the transformation of the traditional business. And I think, it is because the skills and the know-how that type of directors brings is what's missing at the board table. It's being familiar with the challenges and the risks that come with doing innovative work, being better prepared to offer informed advice on how to deal with them, ability to assess if the company is investing sufficiently and in the right technology, and also just, to take a look at the talent in the company and see if that talent will deliver on your digital transformation. So there is a definite, I agree with Pamela, there's been a definite shift in the skills that the boards are looking for.
Yeah, so when I said earlier that it's good to disagree and create conflict as part of panels, because then, different kinds of questions come up. So, people are sort of taking our thinking and now bringing it. And there are some people who are sort of saying, yeah, so that's important, but you also need to, people are coin operated, CEOs are coin operated, C-suite is coin operated. You have to ensure their compensation is balanced, with the compensation and reward program. So, if any of you had any experience in terms of that, and, ensuring that you are aligning the CEO and the C-suite's reward programs to change it to effectively address the innovation and the technology agenda. So, Catherine, do you want to take a shot at that point?
No, I think, metrics and rewards are super important, and clarity in those, and, what gets measured gets done. And so everyone kind of driving for that singular role for sure. I do believe, though, in good transformation programs, you can kind of hit all the boxes. I really believe that technology allows you to improve the customer experience, lower your operating costs, and future-proof your business. And so when it's done well, I think you can actually accomplish all of those things, and all within balance. So no organization can drop their day-to-day, quarter-to-quarter drive, but I don't think you have to as you transform your company. So having the metrics in place, but I do think that that strong teams can accomplish a balanced scorecard.
Yeah, and I just my experience on digitally transforming organizations in North America, Europe, and Asia, I'll tell you, board actually has to play a lot of great roles. I think traditional large companies have had traditional boards, and I think if you look at these huge high growth companies that have only $500-600 million in revenue, but they have a valuation of going public at $40 billion, their board members don't look like the board members for the Fortune 500. By the way, interesting fact for you all, in the Fortune 500, if you take a look at the S&P 500 listed companies in 1960s, an average company used to last on the S&P 500 for almost 60 years. Now, fast forward to 2021, they last average 11 years. And you can actually tie it to fixed mindset, growth mindset, how you actually shift. Are you ready to shift? Are the boards, as someone asked earlier, are the boards actually holding the CEO and the executive suite responsible for, through their compensation, to say share price going up is interesting, but I also would like to figure out, how your newer areas of growth, because there are these, small ones, small competitors coming up, but they may grow much faster as an exponential curve, and you won't have time to react. And I think talent and board composition makes a very important, aspect here. There's an MIT Sloan study that I'd read. It said boards with 3 or more digitally conversant directors experience 38% higher revenue growth. And then they have 34% higher return on assets, and 34% higher market cap, and 17% higher profit margins. So, I think boards are starting to look differently, but I think for traditional companies versus new companies, and the boards who have a higher understanding of opportunities and risk of innovation are creating a cultural and new ethical standards to drive that success. So maybe another question for me was, and I'll go back to the audience because they're asking a lot of questions. So please keep doing that. I want to keep our panelists on, accountable on the questions that we had agreed on. So here's the last one from me, and we'll then switch back to our audience members' questions. So have you sort of change the complement of your boards that, in your companies that you've served at? I know Shaw and, we've got Rogers, ex-executive from there, or WSIB and others, the boards to increase the skill set for innovation and digital transformation. And what does that look like in actual practice? Is it actually happening across Canada and across the US? Has it had an impact on the discussions at the board with respect to digital transformation? Because we're on the Women Get on Board, and we know that we're so behind on having actual board and executive members who are women. But also, one click down is, as you're adding those women, why not kill two birds with one stone? And you add not only the IQ, you add the EQ when you put a woman on the board. That's usually what I suggest to a lot of the board chairs and the CEOs. But also, they bring this empathy as well as transformation and the cultural aspect in. So, what are you seeing? Are you seeing it's happening, across Canada and the US? So, who wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll grab that one. I do think it's happening, but I do feel for people for boards, because there's a lot of asks right now. So we want diversity of gender, of culture, of industry, of speciality. And so there's a lot of asks for boards there's not that many people to check all those boxes. So it is challenging, I think, for boards. I think we're definitely seeing it across the board. We're seeing diversity, but it is slow to change. I think we'd like to see it go a lot faster, but it's, boards don't change all that often, the composition. So it is a work in progress, I would say.
Yeah.
I think it's an important one, Jane. Go ahead. I want to make sure that's an answer to everybody. Yeah, go for it.
No, I was going to say, there's definitely been, thanks to the organizations like Women Get on Board, there's certainly been a lot of push to get women on board. And, you can agree or disagree with, quotas, they work in some countries, it's your sort of personal opinion of what you do. But I think, to your point, having that diversity is great. And then if you bring additional skill set, like a digital transformation, I think, that certainly is beneficial. It definitely boards are trying to diversify in terms of the skills around the table, regardless of, whether it's male or female. They are looking for people who have done some of this work, and they are looking in areas where before maybe they weren't looking necessarily. People that come from digital marketing or e-commerce or startups, right? It just depends. They want that spark. They want that kind of idea that would work in the boardroom. And I think if you think about sort of the softer skills of the director, not necessarily the sort of the technical skills of the director, maybe I'll be a little bit of a contrarian, but many boards kind of describe their culture with pride as being collegial. But to your point, I think very few innovative companies would describe their culture that way. I think they create tension to stimulate ideas and innovation. And so people around the board table who are okay with a groupthink or silent directors or someone who's just reluctant to ask questions because they feel that maybe they're second guessing the management or they're criticizing the CEO, that's no longer doing your job. And I think, boards are beginning to recognize, that creative abrasion, the form of constructive confrontation as a core capability that is needed for innovation.
Yeah.
And that's changing, I think, some of the, again, skill sets or some of the skills that people can bring to the boardroom. They're looking for directors with a passion, with willingness and a drive, to ask the tough questions, to have that conversation in the boardroom.
Yeah.
So that's just maybe another way of looking at the skill sets outside of technical knowledge.
Yeah, it's important, right? I mean, it's that diversity of thought that comes in all shape or form. It's not just gender. It's not just, you need to get more Black individuals on your board. It's not just that you want technology individuals on your board. It's not just that you want cyber with risk controls on your board. It's how do you think about the common denominator that sort of get connected. So as we were talking about this, I can literally see as you guys are talking, people are coming up with new ideas, and someone's asking, as a potential new board member, is it important to see a maturity assessment of the organization from a digital tech and cyber strategy or its effectiveness? And is that important in doing the due diligence in terms of joining before they join the board seat?
I'm going to jump in. I had this conversation not actually just a couple of weeks ago. And again, I think it depends what you as a board member would like to join and how you would like to and feel that you want to contribute. So for me, understanding that an organization is digitally immature or has a long way to go, that's exciting stuff. If there is a chair who is recruiting a board member that wants to get in there and dust it up, or there's a new CEO and they're going to give a transformation mandate to that individual, what an awesome opportunity to get in early and really help shape the strategy that is going to lead to a new life for the organization. So I think that's really exciting. On the other hand, it's also very important to go in eyes wide open. Oh dear, there are some significant cybersecurity risks that we need to get on top of really quickly. And there's going to be some really tough conversations, shiny object over here, or hey, we need to plaster the walls and do the roof, which is not very exciting to look at, but really, really important. So I think having, if they've had it done, that also is a big indicator. Having that discussion and what it means and how it's been interpreted and how it will be acted upon and the role that you're being asked to play as a board member is super important.
I think another interesting thing to do if it's a consumer-facing brand is to actually go through the customer experience. And, whenever I'm thinking about investing or participating with the company, the first thing I do is go order a product or see what it's like before you get the VIP board experience. And even when you're on a board, I always suggest, don't go through the VIP experience what other customers are seeing. And is that a brand that you would be proud to represent and participate with? And does it align with your vision?
Yeah, that's an important aspect of looking at the actual customer experience or the user experience and bringing that in as part of the innovation and digital strategy, because then the board actually gets to see, with all this innovation in digital, what is that actually giving us, and actually walk them through the storyboard. That's such a great point. Someone actually asked on the questions here, they're saying I referred to some points related to a study. It was an MIT Sloan study that I was referring to that was sort of highlighting that when you have boards with 3 or more digitally conversant directors, that they experience all this increased performance. So I know we're just coming very close to time. There's like 5 minutes remaining on it. It would be good for, I think we talked about the innovation agenda. I think we sort of bookended it in 3 different ways, right? So one is the innovation agenda, the board's responsibility, governance, makeup, how you should be thinking about fostering innovation, disruption, fail fast mentality. It's an important point. But then the second is to actually make it real as part of the digital transformation, which again, as I say, technology is only the enabler. Humans are the transformers, right? So we have to balance that. And then it comes down to the culture of how you actually make that happen, which is not easy, because I think it's the culture of the organization, it's the culture of your end customer experience, as Catherine mentioned, but it's also the culture of your board, and those board members have tenures and they've been signed up for that long, and you can't just quickly remove a board member in the middle of your transformation, right? So any last words before maybe I wrap it up? I know those are the three big themes we all wanted to cover. Any last words from anyone else before I wrap it up?
I would just say, don't be afraid of transformation. I think it's a ton of fun. It's really exciting. It's kept me engaged in an industry because it's never the same year after year. One thing I've learned is to never be afraid to ask. I'm not a technologist myself. I have just led technology change because I'm not afraid to ask the questions or say I don't understand. I also suggest that people get, I call it a reverse mentor. So I have a technology mentor of someone that behind the scenes I can say, can you explain this to me like I'm 5? And so I think, whether you're a board member, an executive, or someone in a company, everyone just having open and honest conversations. Things are changing so fast. There's no one on this planet that knows everything about every issue all the time. So we have to have that growth mindset and be open to learning and be open to risk and open to change.
Yeah, I think similar to Catherine, my background is not in technology. I just kind of happened to fall into it, I think, and love it same way. I think because you are actually enacting a real change for the organization. You have the ability to kind of change the path. And I think for me, I think the important part for people maybe to remember that it is a journey. Like you will never get to the final destination because things are going to change, and that pace of change is just going to accelerate. So it's, you have to kind of, the board has to, have the resolve, to continue on the path, make the right decision, kind of fight sort of this natural human aversion to risk, stick to the vision, stick to the strategy, and just enjoy it.
And I would just, thank you. I would just add that, yes, the technology, yes, the transformation, it is the people and working with the people to help them move along in the change management way that just is so often under-resourced, under-discovered, under-thought about, and how the culture of the broader organization is going to embrace or reject that transformation will determine the success or failure of a transformation overall. So you can never underestimate the people component. And like my fellow panelists, I'm not a technologist either. I lead and love transformation. For me, the technology is the enabler. The people, as you said, Armugan, the people make it happen, and they're where the creative juice happens, and that's the good stuff.
I think I'm the only geek nerd on this call, who is a true techie, and but I totally agree with you. I had to unlearn. I think unlearning and rethinking is more important these days than any other time in the industry. I think a bunch of senior executive recently are all touting this amazing book by Adam Grant called Think Again, which is all about our biases that we all have, and we all have huge egos, and we tend to stick to those egos in terms of what it is, and being aware of those and rethinking. Actually, it's saying it's totally okay to rethink the strategy, or else your company or the board that you're on may not survive for too long. And I think that rethinking is something that they have mapped across various different organizations to see the ones who have rethunk. A great example, by the way, that they gave was, if you look at what Mike Lazaridis, which did, the founder of BlackBerry RIM, which was great thinker originally, and thought there's a keyboard and email that needed to go out, but when it came to getting disrupted, and people were saying, well, you should maybe take BBM and open it up like WhatsApp, or you should take internet, and it was just your ability to rethink when you have 60% market share. It's like, I don't want to disrupt my core. My core is great. And, I've had various different conversations with Mike since then. And he said, I totally agree. I think I needed to rethink, and the culture changes from the board. And, Apple, by the way, everyone credits Steve Jobs, but he also didn't rethink. He was, for the longest time, he had a poster on his wall that said, "No phones. I hate phones." and he didn't like phones because he didn't like telcos, believe it or not. And he's written quite a bit. It was in his biography where he just said, "Oh, I don't want to get nickel and dimed." But his team just said, "Give us a time off to the side to try something." And it's not adding phone to an iPod. It was more about, let's take a MacBook and totally, reconstruct it. So his rethinking was just, his board sort of helped him rethink and said, just, I know you're a huge personality, huge ego, Steve, but think differently. And, and at least he gave an inch to think differently. And sometimes you do need board members around the CEO staff to think differently. And I think board members, I personally feel is that's important. So I'd like to wrap up by, number one, thank you to all the three panelists. So Catherine Emberley, James Scoblow, and Pamela Steer. Thank you so much for having that conversation. Thank you for our audience as well for sticking out with us. I think it's about to get much more interesting because each one of us are going to have a breakout room that you can join and continue to have that conversation more in a smaller setting with each one of us. On behalf of KPMG, we're also going to make a donation for, on behalf of Women Get On Boards for a charity partner, Dress for Success. There's a, so that's going to happen. And then I'd also like to just give you some details that I'm seeing coming in here so that you know how to join the breakout session. So we'll start the breakout session. Great opportunity, as I said, for you to link in with the breakout groups. All four of us are going to host one. You'll soon see a pop-up appear on your Zoom where you'll be joining a breakout room, and you can click it, click OK. And once in there, please introduce yourself to the breakout room members and share your thoughts on today's session, especially the ones you didn't like from us, because that's as I said, the conflict's always good. And where's your company governing with a digital first mindset? Maybe share that with us. If you have any issues, please there's an ask for help button somewhere, so you could do that. And your breakout session will go on till 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you're Pacific, that would be what, 2:30? If you're Mountain, that would be 3? It's not written down for me, so I'm thinking, I'm thinking in my head, Saskatoon doesn't change, right? So that they're different. And then once you're done networking, still simply leave the room. And thank you all again. I so appreciate having the conversation and also being invited with such STEAM panels. So hopefully it was a great discussion for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you
for having us.